So when it comes to the top 10 most disappointing movies of last year, I found 10 movies that I was actually pretty curious about, or really excited for, but they let me down for one reason or the other. So that's what I'm going to do here with this list. Now, before I go into my top 10 most disappointing movies of 2020, be sure to comment down below what your top 20 top 10 most disappointing of 2020 last year. Do you like my list? Do you not like it? If you like this video, thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to like this video, comment down below, and share this video on any social media platform you got. Also, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell to get notified when newest videos are up. When I go live in my community tab, and also when I do live streams. I had a little bit tongue twisted there, but I'm very sorry about that. I'm just happy to be recording back on camera back again. So, with that being said, let's get into my top 10 most disappointing movies of 2020. Kicking this list off at number 10 is Greyhound. This was the World War II movie starring Tom Hanks, Elizabeth Shue, and this was, of course, directed by a first-time director, of course, directed by Aaron Snyder. And I was really excited to see this from the trailers, because this is basically Tom Hanks taking on the idea of World War II. What really disappointed me with Greyhound was the characters here and the story. The story was pretty formulaic, and I didn't really get much out of the characters in this 90 minutes film. And for a movie like this movie should have been a lot longer to give more character development out of the characters. And the only character development movie I sadly got was from Tom Hanks. The performances in the movie were great. Tom Hanks, Elizabeth Shue, and everyone else in this cast does a really great job for what they are given. But I felt like the story was not the greatest, and unfortunately that led to this movie being on this list. The action was great, and the direction was great, and the technical aspects was really great. But I felt like if this movie was a little bit longer to flesh out the characters and the story, then I think this would have been at least one of the best movies of last year. But it wasn't, so that's why it's here at number 10. And at number 9, oh, it kind of hurts me having to put this one on the list, because even with the multiple delays and stuff I was hearing about this movie, I was still willing to give this movie the benefit of the doubt. And that movie is unfortunately The New Mutants. I didn't hate this like a lot of people did. I know a lot of people were hating on this movie before it even came out, and basically, even with all the cursed production troubles and then all the delays, I still gave this movie a chance. And this movie interested me from the trailers because it was taking the X-Men series in a new direction. It was basically going into the horror vibe, and while I did appreciate the movie for trying to do something different, and while I did enjoy it for the most part, I felt like that this left a lot to be desired. I felt like that this movie needed those extra reshoots that they were planning to do. And honestly, in my opinion, this should have came out before X-Men Dark Phoenix. Because this movie, you could tell that for a 90-minute film, I could feel like this movie should have been a lot longer. And this was always supposed to be the most story-driven one of the other movies, and I'm not sure if there was studio interference or what, but from what I was told, there wasn't any reshoots planned. But Josh Boone, he's a great director. He did good for his direction. The acting was fine from our 5 main leads, including Anya Taylor-Joy and Henry Braga and Macy Williams. I did wish they did have a little more diversity with the New Mutants as well, but also what really disappointed me was the fact that this movie should have been a little bit more longer than it was, because I feel like with a longer runtime and more scenes to flesh out these characters and more horror vibes, I feel like this would have been Epictastic. Coming to number 8, unfortunately, is The Grudge. I am a big fan of the Ju-On films, and I'm a fan of the American Grudge movies, minus The Grudge 3. So when they announced this Grudge movie, I was actually really excited to see another Grudge movie, because The Grudge, she is one of those creepy properties that scared me as a kid, especially with the whole hair and the whole little rattling noise that she does when she opens her mouth. And unfortunately, the big disappointment here is you don't even see the Grudge in this movie. This is more of it had all the right movements. You had a great cast who is sadly underused. You had an R rating which doesn't really live up to its full potential. And you also have, I kid you not, one of the most stupidest endings of this I've ever seen. The ending in this movie is very stupid, and also the timeline is all over the place. The characters aren't the greatest, despite the performances from everyone in the cast, and they do try. And the direction, it was great. I feel like the writing wasn't there. So with The Grudge, this was just a movie that it had good intentions, and I felt like this had potential. But unfortunately for me, The Grudge was just a big disappointment in terms of the Grudge films, because I was really pulling through for this. And you could tell that the fact that this movie was in development hell for so long also kind of hurt this movie a bit. So that's why it's in the most disappointing category. Seventh place is Superman Ray of the Sun. This was just not for me. I am a Superman fan, but I did not really enjoy this all that much. I didn't like the fact, I appreciate the fact that you try something different as having a Superman in the Soviet Union, but there was a lot of decisions in terms of the story I just wasn't a big fan of. I wasn't a big fan of Lex Luthor and Lois Lane being married. I wasn't a fan of a lot of other choices that they decided to go with. The animation was fine, and I also think the voice acting was really fine, and the action when it's there, I think was pretty solid. But this is just a movie that really didn't do much for me, and just as a Superman fan, it's not really that great of a film, unfortunately. And this is just like with Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, this is one Superman movie, even though I didn't hate it, this is one movie that I will never watch again. And that's coming from a Superman fan like myself. Coming in 6th place, one of the movies I hated, which you will be seeing again in my worst movies of 2020, and that is Artemis Fowl. Oh, Disney. I love Disney. Now Disney, they're having a bit of an up and down track record, but Artemis Fowl, this was another movie, despite all the production troubles I was hearing, I still gave this movie a chance. Because with every movie, that's what I do. I like to give every movie a chance. No matter how good, how bad, how meh the movie is. I always want to be open-minded on a movie. But Artemis Fowl, I haven't read the books, but when I saw the trailers, this actually had potential. It reminded me of Men in Black and Legends of Tomorrow and just a bunch of other franchises. And this could have really gone somewhere. Unfortunately, the production troubles really does show because the constant delays, and this is barely even like the book, and even Artemis Fowl fans has complained that this wasn't even like the books, and I can see where they're coming from. Artemis Fowl is one of the most biggest misfires from Disney I've seen. The acting is not the problem, except for Josh Gad and Judi Dench, who they are better actors than this. I can tell that Kenneth Branagh had a vision, but it just felt like the studio meddled in. And also some of the effects at times I think were pretty good, but at other times a lot of the effects in this movie were really freaking terrible. And also the characters, you didn't really care about any of the characters. I didn't really care about the story. The movie was pretty boring a lot. And it's just a very lackluster, disappointing film. The only character I actually really liked was Laura McDonald as Holly Short, which she was doing her best. Ferdia Shaw is not his fault, but all these young actors, I do wish them the best of luck in their careers, and I am interested to see what they do next. And also, Colin Farrell is not even in this movie, so Artemis Fowl is at number 6. This is a waste of potential, and this movie has the nerve to set up a sequel, which I really hope they do not do sequels to this, because I'm pretty sure everyone has spoken. This movie is that bad that it hasn't even gotten a physical media release yet, and I don't think it will. And also, one of the worst movies to start off this new decade. Before I get into my top 5 movies that disappointed me, I would like to take a little intermission and show you that all my social media links are in the description box down below. And also, if you want to send money to my channel, you can do that as well. Or you want to send fan mail, you can DM me, email me as well. Be sure to check out my merchandise store in the description box down below. And check out my Amazon wish list in the description box down below if you would like to send anything from that wish list. With that being said, let's get into the top 5. In 5th place is Capone, now directed by Josh Trank. This was a movie that I was actually really curious about, because Josh Trank, he is a great director. His only good movie, unfortunately, is Chronicle. I was not a fan of Fantastic. Well, I was a defender of Fantastic until I watched the movie again, and I realized how bad it was. But Capone, I was pulling through because you have a great cast of actors like Tom Hardy as Al Capone, Linda Cardellini, Kyle MacLachlan, and I will say this, the cast is really good. Tom Hardy, yeah, he's a bit hit and miss with his accent at times as Al Capone, but I could tell he was trying to give a good performance, and I will say that Josh Trank's direction is really good. Unfortunately, everything else in this movie did not really pander out too well, and that sadly is due because of the way that this movie, I don't know, this is a movie you have to see to believe. I don't want to spend too much time on it because I'm not even still sure what I thought of this movie. I'm not even sure what I thought of the movie completely. So this is kind of like a guilty pleasure, but also pretty bland movie at the point. But Josh Trank, I'm still pulling for you as a director. I'm still pulling for you. Coming in fourth place is The Rhythm Section, directed by Reed Morano. Now, I am a fan of Reed Morano's first two directorial efforts, I Think We're Alone Now and Meadowland. Those are great, underrated films that I would highly suggest checking out. In The Rhythm Section, this was going to be her first move to a big budget film. And the producers are James Bond doing this. And unfortunately, while I do think the direction is great, and while I do think Blake Lively and Jude Law and the rest of the cast do fine for what is required of them, I didn't really enjoy The Rhythm Section that much. I thought this was a boring and generic spy film. The action was cool, but the story and characters were a bit lacking for me, and I didn't really get much out of the character development here. And this basically comes off as a Black Widow knockoff, in which Ava was better than this, but I'm not to put the director of this movie down. I'm not putting anybody down with this movie. It's just that when it comes to a movie like this, The Rhythm Section, I expected a lot more from this movie, and unfortunately, I walked out pretty disappointed. We're getting into the top three, and my number three is Bloodshot. Now, don't get me wrong, I did enjoy parts of this movie. I thought it's a fun little 90s throwback film that knows what it is, but the big disappointment here was that you have Vin Diesel. This is another chance at Vin Diesel to go into another different franchise. And I like Vin Diesel, I like the cast. Isaac Gonzalez was really good as KT and also beautiful. The rest of the cast I thought was really good. Guy Pearce is an underrated actor. The action set pieces were pretty cool for what we got, but this movie unfortunately was that this movie should have been rated R. This movie should have been rated R. This movie doesn't really feel like a PG-13 rated film. This feels something that I'm pretty sure was shot as an R-rated movie and then probably cut down as PG-13. Some of the effects at times on Vin Diesel's Bloodshot are pretty cool, but also there were times where it just looked like a PlayStation 2 video game. Also, I didn't really get much development out of our main characters here, despite the performances being really good. Also, there were moments where this movie was quite boring, and also the biggest disappointment here was the story. I didn't really get much out of the story here. Like I said, this is a Redbox rental. This is a rainy day time waster. I still enjoyed parts of Bloodshot. I can watch it, but who knows? Maybe they are gonna do a sequel to Bloodshot 2, and I do hope the next movie for this whole Valiant comic cinematic universe is a little bit better. But Bloodshot is an okay film, but could have been a lot better. Now we're getting into the top two, and these two are horror movies. And I have to choose between which one disappointed me the most. And I switched out my initial number one after another movie I saw really disappointed me. So my number two, which was initially my number one, is Fantasy Island. Now, Truth or Dare was not a great movie by any means, but I do have a little bit of a so bad it's good thing for it. And when it comes to Fantasy Island, I was actually pulling through for this. This is actually one of my most anticipated movies of last year. Because, now, I have not seen the show from the 70s. So I wanted a fresh, clean slate, and I will say that the performances in this movie were good. And Maggie Q, Lucy Hale, Portia Doubleday, everyone in the cast was all doing the best they could with the scripts. And I did like some of the rules and regulations that you set up, and some of the ideas that you have. But what lost me with Fantasy Island are the two big things. Was I didn't really care too much for the characters, except for Maggie Q's character, because she wanted to basically live a fantasy where she would be happily married and in love and have a family. And I felt for her. And the big thing is that this movie does not know what it wants to be after a while. It doesn't know if it wants to be a horror movie, it doesn't know if it wants to be a fantasy movie, it doesn't even know if it wants to be a comedy, because there's a lot of balancing tones that this movie tries to go for, and it just really came off very lackluster, very disappointing at best. And unfortunately, that did play into the writing of the movie. The writing of the characters are very non-existent. I thought Jeff Wallow's direction was fine, and the cinematography aspect and the score was fine, but there are times where the direction is very inconsistent. And the whole plot twist at the end of this movie with Lucy Hale. This is easily the worst plot twist I've seen of last year. Lucy Hale basically went to the island herself before bringing her friends onto the island. And at first I was kind of liking her, even though she was not that likable, getting revenge against a childhood bully. But then when you have to go and pull that stupid plot twist and make her the bad guy, which obviously you should just have a different twist to where Lucy Hale and Maggie Q, they riz up against this whole rules of Fantasy Island and killed Michael Pena at the end of the movie, which Michael Pena, he does try, but he's no Mr. Rourke. He's no Ricardo Montalban. But the twist that really disappointed me, Lucy Hale's character basically brought these characters to the island just to have them kill off one by one for revenge for the death of her boyfriend that she saw only 1 year and 1 month, 1 day ago, and die in a fire accident. That shouldn't even made the final cut or the final draft of the script, because that is the most absurd plot twist, and it basically ruins my enjoyment of the movie when you get to that twist. Like I said, guilty pleasure at best, but still disappointing nevertheless. Coming in number 1 for the most disappointing movie of last year. That movie is Antebellum. Antebellum was the most disappointing movie of last year. This was a movie that I have faith in. It was from the producers of Get Out and Us, except for Jordan Peele. These were first time directors, Bush and Rains, and I will say it doesn't feel like a first time directed movie, because the direction in this movie, I think, camera wise and visually wise, is beautiful. I do love the opening scene. This camera work is really beautiful. The score is very intriguing, and you have a very interesting concept about a successful author played by Janelle Monáe, and then she basically has to go in a time loop to basically uncover this mystery of this old antebellum before it's too late. That should have been a good time travel horror movie. Instead, this movie was very mismarketed, and this movie is basically a slavery time travel film. That's basically what this movie is. like I say in my review, the actors are not the problem. Janelle Monáe, Jenna Malone, Gabriel Sidby, Eric Lane, everyone in the cast do fine for what they are given. But they're not given 1 ounce of character development for any of their characters. Especially with Janelle Monáe and Jenna Malone. When it comes to the whole, her part of the villain being this whole white supremacist character, which this movie went into, and this movie also tried way too hard to be like Get Out and Us, which those movies have something to say. Whereas this movie is just slavery shock value for the sake of shock value. And the whole plot twist of the movie is revealed none than 40 minutes in. You should, which I thought from the trailers that we're gonna go the route of her in modern day being a successful author, and then as we go later on to the movie, she would be put on the plantation and in the time loop, and you have to go back and forth to basically try to uncover the mystery. And I feel like if they would have done it that way, I think this would have been a much better movie. At the end of the day, I just didn't really care too much for Antebellum. I didn't hate it. It wasn't one of the worst movies of 2020, but it was the most frustrating and the most disappointing because you have this really interesting premise. It's brilliant, but execution-wise was not very strong. And that's why Antebellum was my most disappointing movie of 2020. Those were my top 10 most disappointing movies of 2020. What are yours? I will see you guys in the next video. You guys keep it cool, enjoying the Epictastic.